So this study came about because we observed that chemotherapy patients simultaneously have gut side effects of chemo as well as brain and behavioral side effects. And since there's been kind of a surge in data suggesting that if your microbiome changes, it can influence brain and behavior, we thought that chemotherapy, this might be really relevant in that context. And no one had, we knew that chemotherapy altered your microbiome, so the bacteria, the community in your gut. We just hadn't known whether it related at all to brain side effects of chemotherapy, like cognitive decline. And so that's what we sought out to do. We had a longitudinal study where we looked in women with breast cancer at their microbiome using a fecal sample before they got chemo, during chemo, and then after chemo was over. And at the same time points, we looked at their cognitive function. And we found that indeed chemotherapy shifted their microbiome, and that shift related to cognitive decline, suggesting a potential link between your gut and your brain in the context of chemo. I think most notable was that people hadn't linked anything to any of these changes in the microbiome to the brain yet. Another thing that was interesting is we thought the signals from the gut microbiome to the brain might be happening via the immune system, and it didn't seem to be linking the microbiome to the cognitive decline. So that was interesting. Lauren, do you have anything else that you think was remarkable?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about the study was really the novelty of linking changes in the gut microbiome to the changes in cognition, indicating that future studies could look at using this as a potential therapeutic or mechanistic relationship for helping patients in the future.
I mean, one study doesn't really allow us to make recommendations. I think, like Lauren said, the research is what we're trying to do is to see whether we could manipulate the gut microbiome to improve behavioral side effects. And this would be really helpful because it wouldn't be like giving another drug to these patients who are getting poked and prodded all the time to treat their chemo. If we were able to manipulate the gut microbiome, that's potentially less expensive than a drug and less invasive than a drug. And there's a potential for us to use just a microbiome sample to predict who is vulnerable to cognitive decline with chemo. And if we're able to determine who those people might be, then we could potentially use something like diet or probiotics or a fecal microbial transplant to prevent that from ever happening. So that's what the research hopes to do long term with we need more than one study to make sure that that's a viable option.